discussions over Iran's nuclear programme. We do stay in the Middle East now, though, and European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has said that while there are encouraging signs of increased humanitarian aid reaching Gaza, the EU expects more concrete progress on the ground. Her comments came ahead of a high-level meeting in Brussels with senior EU and Middle Eastern officials to assess the humanitarian situation in the war-torn enclave. Kallas acknowledging that some aid trucks and supplies are now entering Gaza more consistently following a recent agreement between the EU and Israel aimed at easing humanitarian access. The agreement includes provisions for opening more crossings points and facilitating aid routes. We see some good signs of more trucks getting in, more supplies to the people of Gaza. Kallas told that to reporters. But of course, we know this is not enough. We need to push more so that the implementation of what we have agreed also happens on the ground. That again from Kaja Kallas. The EU has been pressing Israel to allow more sustained and unhindered aid deliveries into Gaza, where the humanitarian crisis has worsened due to the ongoing conflict, displacement and limited access to essential goods and services. Kallas emphasised that the EU will continue working with all regional partners to ensure that commitments are made and are upheld in principle, but also visibly impacting conditions for the civilians living in Gaza. Well, joining us to discuss these statements and the ongoing situation in the Gaza enclave is Shruti Dasgupta, an international affairs expert who joins us live from New Delhi. Shruti, as always, thank you for being here. Some clear comments coming out of the EU. Kaja Kallas saying that while improvements have been made, the situation is still grave and still needs to be improved. How significant is this intervention from a top EU leader, given that there has been, of course, a conflict in world leaders and Western leaders over the situation in Gaza amidst the Israel-Hamas war?
Greetings, Joshua. Thank you for inviting me. For me, it feels as if the EU has always been in support of Gaza aid, and they have this current aid discussion via Kallas has been something that is absolutely against what Spain and Germany, they've been very vocal about it. They do not want this association. And there will be, I think, a few days from now, going to be a talk of Israel's breach of faith with the EU with regards to their ongoing conflict in Gaza. So this is a thing that is unfolding. In terms of aid itself, the EU has felt that, okay, this was very much required, that a third person, apart from US and Israel-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, provides aid to the Gazans, that 2 million Gazans that are suffering from insufficient fuel, insufficient food, water and supply. So all of this is absolutely necessary. But in addition to that, the statement that she made was that they need to be sure that the aid does not percolate down to Hamas. And that is something which, how they will do it is not clear as yet. Those particular conditions have not been discussed. Beyond that, they have also agreed to kind of have EU border assistance mission for the Rafah crossing point. So they've kind of they've talked about redeployment of the EU border assistance at the crossing point of Rafah. They've not yet spoken about which points where they will be exactly these aid distribution points. And they also want to be very clear that they should not be confused by the Palestinians to be the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. So they want a distinct identity for themselves. They do not want this aid to flow via the routes of Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. They want their own aid points, while they want to make sure that there is no aid diversion happening to Hamas. So the situation for EU is like walking on a very tight rope. They want aid to come through, but they don't want Israel to have any direct, access to the funds or the aid itself, and they do not want Hamas also to have this. So it's a very tightrope walk, and I hope they do make it so that a large swath of humanity gets access to the required food and other necessities for basic life.
Yes, absolutely. And Shruti, as we bring our discussion towards an end, of course, so much talk around diplomacy, so much talk around politics and the GHF and other potential aid routes. But ultimately, there are millions of people here that are potentially facing a humanitarian crisis which is unimaginable. How important is it that these aid disputes and the different routes are set up in a way that is safe and won't see civilian casualties like has been reported? Hundreds of deaths, the UN say, have taken place around aid sites in Gaza since the end of the short-lived ceasefire deal. How important is it that while diplomacy stalls on the sidelines and conversations around a ceasefire continue to drag on, that the situation for the people living in Gaza, many millions who have already been displaced, how important is it that it's set up and it's right and it's acting in a way that is helping the people?
So while the aid is important, we have to understand that the entire scenario in Gaza is very, very muddy. It is covered in fog of war. We cannot distinguish Gazans from Hamas, because Hamas, when we look at them via pictures and reports, they're wearing that black garb and that green headband and with guns in their hands, but they don't really walk around Gaza like that. Recently, I think it has been reported that they killed 3 more Israeli IDF soldiers, and they've called it the war of attrition. So that basically means that Hamas is still very active. They are very much capable of countering Israel and its forces. The only difference is that the Gazan forces, the Hamas is no longer in uniform. So you cannot differentiate between a normal Gazan and Hamas. So right now for Israel, all of Gaza is Hamas, and they cannot differentiate. And this is the reason why when the lines are slow moving, when there is suspicious movement, when there is somebody that distinctly looks familiar to a known face of Hamas, they try and engage with them, and that leads to a loss of life and casualty. And the aid line seems to be the only way to draw out Hamas into the open. So this is how it's like a mousetrap set up. But unfortunately, in this mousetrap, a lot of civilian life loss happens. And there seems to be no way out. Gazans seem to be incapable to throwing Hamas out of from within their own. Because whenever they've tried, Hamas has gone ahead and shot the very people who have tried to encourage a revolution where Gazans disengage from Hamas and their identity. So Gazans are stuck between this ugly political push and pull between Israel wanting the Hamas out and using Gazans as their political currency, and Hamas is using Gazans as their political currency, not just with Israel, but with the world, so that aid and fuel and all the other facilities come through. So right now, with the EU, the discussions that have gone through, I think since March, this is the first time fuel trucks have gone inside Gaza, and a little bit of the fuel shortage might be mitigated by it. I believe part of the EU deal with Israel is that they will allow power supply to water supply mechanisms. They will allow it to hospitals so that basic necessity is met, water supply resumes, medical emergencies are attended to. So these are a few conditions that EU has tried to push forth. As the largest trade partner with Israel, they have this currency that they're using very well to ensure that Israel does what is right by humanity. But on the other side of this, when Hamas calls it a war of attrition, that means they're in it for the long haul. They've dug in their heels, and they're prepared to take whatever life loss in the form of Gazan civilians. They are not looking for peace.
Yes, Shruti, sorry to have to cut you off. We are unfortunately out of time, but thank you ever so much.